There is a certain kind of person who is always the one everyone turns to, the one who gives the best advice, the one who notices things before anyone else does, the one who can explain almost anything in a way that finally makes sense. People are drawn to them, they respect them. Sometimes they even envy them. But here's the strange part. That same person often goes home and feels completely alone. Most people assume that being smart makes life easier. Better grades, better jobs, better decisions, more respect from others. And in some ways that's true. But the truth most people never talk about is this. Being highly intelligent can also be one of the loneliest experiences a person can go through. Not because smart people are arrogant, not because they think they're better than everyone else, but because of something much simpler and much sadder than that. Today, we're going to talk about why highly intelligent people are so often the loneliest people in the room, where this loneliness actually comes from, and what it means if you felt this way for as long as you can remember. So why does this happen? Why would being smart make someone feel more alone instead of more connected? The answer starts with something simple. Most conversations are built around a shared pace. Two people talk, they go back and forth, and their minds move at roughly the same speed. That's what makes a conversation feel easy and comfortable. But for someone with a very fast or very deep way of thinking, that shared pace doesn't always exist. Their mind jumps ahead. They see where a conversation is going before it gets there. They notice patterns, connections, and problems that other people simply haven't gotten to yet. And so, without meaning to, they end up slowing themselves down. Again and again, simplifying their thoughts. Holding back the fifth idea because the first one hasn't landed yet. Smiling and nodding instead of saying what they actually think, because they've learned that saying it fully tends to make people uncomfortable, or worse, tends to make people quietly pull away. Over time, this becomes a habit, and the habit has a cost. Because every time you shrink your thoughts to fit into a conversation, you also shrink the chance that anyone will ever actually meet the real you. This is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being different in a way that's hard to explain and even harder for others to notice. And that difference, quietly over years, can turn into a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around, the loneliness of being around people constantly and still feeling unseen. Let's look at what this actually feels like in everyday life. First, they often feel like the advice giver, but rarely the one who receives advice. Friends come to them with problems. Family calls them when something goes wrong. They're good at listening, good at untangling messy situations, good at helping people see things clearly. But when it's their turn to struggle, there's a strange silence. Partly because people assume they already have it figured out, and partly because they've gotten so used to being the strong one that they've forgotten how to ask for help at all. Have you ever solved everyone else's problems in a single day, and then lay awake that night with your own? Second, they often feel bored or drained in small talk, but they don't say so, because they don't want to seem rude or superior. Small talk about the weather, about someone's weekend, about nothing in particular, can feel like trying to run a marathon in slow motion. Not because they don't care about people, they care deeply. But their mind is constantly reaching for something a little more real, a little more meaningful, and small talk rarely gets them there. So they smile, they nod, they wait for the conversation to move somewhere deeper. Often, it never does. Third, they hold back their real thoughts because they've learned that sharing them fully can make people withdraw. Maybe they've said something honest before and watched the room go quiet. Maybe they've shared an idea that was met with confusion instead of interest. So they learn to edit themselves in real time, to offer the simple version instead of the whole version. Not out of dishonesty, but out of self-protection. The problem is, every edited version is one step further away from actually being known. Fourth, they often feel like they're watching life from slightly outside of it. Not detached exactly, just a little bit ahead or a little bit underneath, noticing details other people miss. The way a friend's voice changes when they're upset, but pretending not to be. The subtle pattern in a conversation that's about to turn into an argument. This kind of awareness can feel like a strange sort of loneliness, being present in the room, but somehow standing at a distance from everyone else in it. And fifth, the friendships they do have often feel incomplete because they can only share part of themselves. They might have plenty of people around, coworkers, old friends, family, but very few, if any, who they can talk to without holding something back. And that gap between how many people surround them and how few truly know them is where the loneliest part of the story really lives. Here's the part that's hard to admit. After enough years of shrinking your thoughts to fit into conversations, you can start to lose track of your own voice completely. You get so good at editing yourself that you're not even sure what the unedited version sounds like anymore. And this is the quiet tragedy underneath all of it. People assume that if you're intelligent, you must feel confident, capable, secure. But intelligence doesn't protect you from loneliness. In some ways, it actually makes the loneliness harder to explain to anyone, including yourself. Because how do you tell someone, I have plenty of people around me, and I still feel completely alone, without sounding ungrateful or dramatic or like you're somehow above it all? So most people don't say it. They just carry it quietly, year after year, wondering if they're the only one who feels this way. They're not. But here's what's important to understand. This isn't a flaw. It's not something wrong with you. It's simply what happens when a mind that moves a little differently tries to fit into conversations built for an average pace. You adapted. You learned to make yourself easier to be around. And for a long time, that adaptation probably served you well. But you don't have to keep shrinking forever. The first shift is small. Start looking for the handful of people who don't need you to slow down. They exist. They're often quieter, harder to find, and don't always show up in the way you'd expect. But when you find someone who can keep pace with you, or who's simply curious enough to try, hold on to that. It's rarer and more valuable than almost anything else. The second shift is this: let yourself be the one who needs something sometimes. You don't always have to be the advice giver. You're allowed to be the one who's struggling. You're allowed to say, actually, I don't have this figured out either. That single sentence, as uncomfortable as it feels, is often the first real bridge to being known. You were never too much. You were simply waiting for people who could meet you where you actually are. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've ever been surrounded by people and still felt like no one really knew you, I want you to know this. That loneliness doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means you've been carrying a mind that moves a little differently, mostly by yourself, for a very long time. You don't have to keep carrying it alone. If this video reached something in you, leave a comment below, or even just a dot, so we know no one is sitting with this feeling by themselves tonight. If this helped you feel a little less alone, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next journey into the mind. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.